Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's regular meeting of Walpole Select Board. Please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A couple of housekeeping items. David Salvatore and Jim Johnson are down the hall at a school building meeting. They'll join us shortly, so when they get here, they'll pick us up wherever we are. And Nancy McKenzie will be here tonight. She's just stuck in traffic, apparently, so she'll join us in progress as well. But we've got a fair amount to cover tonight, so I wanted to make sure that we went ahead and got going. One public service announcement that I'd like to make is that due to the coronavirus and all the things that are with that, the Friends of St. Patrick annual luncheon, which is scheduled for this Friday, the 13th, up at Ambrosia's, has been canceled. And so if we could pass the word on that, because I know there are about 1,000 people that were supposed to come to that this year, if we could just pass the word on that, that'd be awesome. And more to come in terms of how the board is going to handle that, how the Friends of St. Patrick board is going to handle that. We're putting out some information on that in the not too distant future, but the key thing right now is just to make sure everyone gets the word that it's canceled. Okay, so our first appointment this evening is with Chief Carmichael, a quarterly update for police. Chief?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So jumping right into the police quarterly report. Under personnel, our student officers, we have 3 student officers that are currently in the police academy. Student officer Pat Baker, William Mitchell, they are both part of the Transit MBTA Academy. And student officer Rich Ordway, who's at the Reading Academy. We anticipate that they will be graduating pretty soon. We don't have a date yet, but probably the end of March, early April, we should start turning those guys over through the graduation process. As the board knows, recent promotions, Deputy Chief Rich Kelleher, who's been doing a fine job, and Sergeant O'Connor, he hit the ground running as well. He's working on the 4 to 12 shift and doing a great job with his shift. One commendation over this first quarter, and this went to Sergeant O'Connor, providing commendation for Officer Slavin and Powers for their efforts during an overdose victim. And she actually reached out to us yesterday to let us know that she was doing very well. And as we mentioned before, this is a great thing. You know, it's outside of the traditional policing responsibilities, but we are able to go back with people that suffer from substance use disorders or suffer from overdose and provide them with resources to get into treatment. And as you know, right here on Common Street, we now have the Recovery Center right here in our own community. That's a great resource for people to use. So while we're on that topic, I guess I did pass out the current situational awareness for drug overdoses in Walpole, which we've been tracking since 2011. And we currently stand at 226 total overdoses and 40 fatalities. And as we've mentioned many times before, that's not a number. Those are people. Those are people that are part of our community. This continues to be a significant public safety issue, and I guess the good news is the trend this year is much lower than it was last year at this time, and we hopefully that trend will continue. But those are the numbers as where we stand now. One of the we've been dealing with this quarterly report, a lot of stuff, just a lot of management issues and things that are going on in the department. Just to bring the board up to date, the civil fingerprinting, we've implemented that. That was from Article 14 of the 2018 Fall Town Meeting. And we ratified, town meeting ratified that, created Article 2, Section 378.5, and that is the new civil fingerprinting bylaw And that was approved by the Attorney General's office, approved by the FBI. And then we were able to update our cross-match system, which is our fingerprint system, and upgrade our, give us an upgrade to the automated fingerprint identification system, AFIS, which is done through the FBI. We created a policy and procedure, and so far this is working great. And essentially what it is when people come in and apply for, let's just say it's a liquor license transfer. That new person is coming in. We will do a background check for the town. It's fingerprint based, and then we will provide the town and usually go back to Cindy and say that there's no issues here, or in certain circumstances we could come back and say this might be an issue of unsuitability. If a liquor license, say the person has 3 OUIs on their record or something, that might not be the person that you want to have a liquor license. So so far we've done a few of them and provided that information to Cindy. And going forward, one of the big issues we used to have with this issue was out of town door-to-door salesmen coming in. And what we found many times is they didn't bother adhering to the bylaw of registering when they come into the town. And when we did come across them through complaints from citizens in neighborhoods, we'd find out that they have very long, extensive criminal histories, a lot of breaking and entering, burglary, that kind of stuff. Certainly not the people that you want to be going door to door. And a lot of times we would have to make arrests even on our bylaw. So this has really helped shore up that, make the town safer in the end. The hands-free law, I did pass out a grant summary. We've got multiple grants that we've either been able to secure an award for, or we're still going for others. The 911 grant we got, the Bulletproof Vest program that we get through the State of Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, and the other half of that we get through the Department of Justice. We were able to secure that grant again this year. So the body armor that the officers wear is very expensive. They're about $900 for each one. And so when we continuously, they're good for about 5 years, so we can continuously apply for those grants, get those grants, and help save the town a significant amount of money. We do that. The highway safety grant, that's a big one. We got about $12,000 for that. That's your click at a ticket, drive sober, get pulled over. The new one is distracted driving, and we've been pulling over many vehicles where people are they're texting and driving. So right now it's kind of an educational component, trying to make the stops, let people know about the new law. And come April, that's when the state will start to implement actual money fines and everything for that violation. There's one on there, Massachusetts Jail and Diversion Program. We applied for this one to try and get the department funding to do our mental health training. As you know, our mental health calls have increased significantly every year over the past few years, 100% every year. Last year we had over 300 mental health calls, which involved suicidal ideation, just people in crisis that need the resources, and they're reaching out. We're trying to get rid of the stigma associated with it, but also help provide resources. And this grant here would help us come up to compliance with the international chiefs, a commitment that we've made to train the entire police department in mental health first aid, which is an 8-hour course, and then in crisis intervention training, which is a week-long course. And we want to make sure that every officer is trained in that, because it's one of the biggest things that we deal with today. So, and we're going for that. And then the most recent one we also got was the printers that are inside of our cruisers, e-citation, so we can actually, when we write citations now, we're going to be able to write that citation electronically right from our mobile data terminals, download all the information in, transfer that information over to an e-citation, print that out to give to the violator. It automatically goes to the registry on that end, and it saves us a lot of time, effort, and basically administrative follow-up. So we're pretty excited about that. That's almost ready to go and online. Compliance checks, we did compliance checks on liquor license establishments this past month. We checked 34 establishments. We had 2 violations, which is pretty good. When time goes, it's been a while since we did the last one. Usually when there's a little bit of a time lapse, we have more. At one point, I think we had 7 one year. So we had 2 failures, and I think the board will be taking that up probably in the near future. Human Trafficking Initiative, we had the FBI, and we worked in partnership with Walpole Field Inn, and we had a meeting up there, and we discussed initiatives on human trafficking. You know, human trafficking is something that's not right open, you know, it's not openly done right in front of our face, but it happens. It's throughout this entire area. The FBI assisted our detectives in getting onto a database that is only for law enforcement, that actually tracks all of the listings and the postings of different sites that tie into human trafficking. And so we have that all set up with our detectives, and we're going to be working with them in the near future to try and do some of the enforcement on that. And essentially our focus will be focused on human trafficking, but also on any type of exploitment of children. Just in the past month, we had 2 incidents where one of our detectives, Taylor Bethany, tracked a girl that was trafficked, and she tracked her all the way down to Florida, and she was in Fort Lauderdale. And another case, that stayed inside of Massachusetts, but it was from the North Shore, and the girl ended up somehow getting down to Walpole and then back into Boston, and Taylor was able to track her down as well. So that was a great job with that. And the other big issues right now are our continuing efforts for the Alice Alert Lockdown Informed Counter evacuating our schools. We did a shelter-in-place drill for all of our schools. We hope to do another drill before the end of the year. And then ASHER, Active Shooter Hostile Event Response, that's the multidisciplinary training that police and fire are working in collaboration with to come up with different phases. So we've finished phase 1. We're going to be looking to do phase 2 before the end of this fiscal year, and then phase 3, which will be a much bigger kind of a event where we kind of put everything that we've trained on into actual scenarios. It'll be scenario-based training, so we look forward to doing that. And that's pretty much it for this quarter.
Great. Questions for the chief? Comments?
I don't have any now. I know we're going to go into it later on,
Yeah.
too, so
Yeah.
I'll hold off until then.
Same here. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So next we have Chief Bailey, the fire chief, to talk to us about his quarterly report.
This will be for the back end of the ambulance rates.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I won't know who I am now, no?
These are for the other 2 and for Jim.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The last time I was here was on December 3rd. Since that time, we finished out 2019 with 3,593 emergency calls, 4,365 inspections and permits, for a total of 7,958 calls for service, or 21.8 per day. In 2020, we're off to about the same start as we were last year. We did have a major house fire on March 1st, and there were no injuries as a result of that. The ambulance current balance in the account is $1,508,033. Current budget, I have no issues at this time. On the capital end of things, ambulance 2, which is the one that we replaced, will be in on this Thursday. It's being delivered. The brush truck was delivered 3 weeks ago. We're waiting for the hose to come in on that, and that'll be placed into service as soon as we have it. We've also gotten the boat issue squared away, and we have the boat in service in the station over next door. Our tactical gear has been ordered. We expect that any day, and we're in the process of ordering all of our turnout gear, which was approved, which will give everyone a second set, as well as the other members that need gear, their new gear as well. So that's in the process right now with folks getting measured. AFG grant, which is the Assistance to Firefighters grant. We've received several of those in the past. This year we've taken a little bit different approach with that, in that we're doing a regional grant with 11 other communities that all service the Stewart Hospital. And what we're doing with that grant is we're getting a mobile simulation lab so that we can run certain scenarios in a mobile setting to keep our ALS staff current. So that is what we're working on. There will be no match with that grant if we get it. The match will be taken care of by an account that the Norfolk County Chiefs have. SAFE grant, we received another SAFE grant, which is a Student Awareness Fire Education grant for $4,565. We also received our Senior SAFE grant, which is $2,552. On January 16th, we held an event at the Senior Center. That was a Senior SAFE event, and it was very well attended. On fire prevention, still extremely busy. A lot of the projects that are being built in town are all coming to fruition now, and those inspections will be going on, and they will be occupied in the next couple of months, or start to occupy. So the deputy's been extremely busy with that. Fire alarm division, which we haven't talked about in quite some time, that is picking up speed again as we have to do all the pole transfers on Route 1A as part of the Route 1A construction project. That'll be starting in the next month or so. Firefighter John Hamilton has been taking care of that. He'll be doing the double poles that are throughout town as well as the transfers for that project. Training. The tower ladder is in service. We've used it on several occasions. We are still trying to secure some additional funding, which hopefully I'll have at the end of the budget cycle, this current budget, for advanced training on that piece of equipment. We've had COVID-19 training recently. We're keeping our staff up to date with all the developments as they unfold day to day. It's a very fluid situation, as everyone is well aware of. New building familiarizations, we've been through Siemens, 1034 East, 95 West, and 767 East Street. We do this on a recurring basis, approximately every 6 to 8 weeks, while they're being constructed, so that the crews can see how they're constructed, as well as how they look on the finish end of it before we actually take them over as far as response goes on a full-time basis. Natural gas training, sprinkler training, and as the chief mentioned, we're working on the active shooter training as we speak. William Shernick, who we hired several months ago, will be starting the academy a week from Monday. We have 3 other candidates who will be coming before the board on the 24th of this month for appointment. That'll get us up to, everyone will be up to, all of our groups will be up to 10 on a shift, and we'll be able to fill the fire prevention slot, which we've had open, which we settled through our most recent collective bargaining agreement. So we should be all set with that. I still have one outstanding injury. I got an update on that today. That individual will still be out for another 6 to 8 weeks, and hopefully we can get him back at that point. On the community end of things, open burning season is open. I encourage anyone that is planning on doing open burning to do it sooner rather than later, as it has been extremely dry. And the last 2 days were a testament to that. They were high class 4 days. Class 5 days are red flag days, and we're not allowed to burn. So hopefully we get a little bit of rain, people can get the burning done that they need to, and like I said, get it done sooner rather than later, because if you wait until April, it's a gamble. So that goes through May 1st. Night before the 4th, we are actively seeking donations. That is an all-donation event that the fire department runs. We're currently behind on our donations for that, so any help that people could give to us would be much appreciated. And lastly, I'd like to just mention, and you acted on this 2 weeks ago, but the Middlesex Savings Charitable Foundation gave us a $10,000 grant for equipment that we have to have spent within this past year. We're looking to buy, update our metering equipment with that, which is for our gas leaks. So we're very appreciative of that donation. And that's all I have.
Great, Chief. Just a couple quick questions. On the night before the 4th, you mentioned you're behind on the fundraising. How
Yes.
far behind are we on that?
Several thousand.
So, and that's compared to historical, you
So
know,
we had, typically, we have to have a $7,500 deposit for the fireworks. That was supposed to be in last week. We asked the company if we could extend that for another 3 or 4 weeks, and they gave us, because they've been with us since day one, they allowed us to do that. Typically, fundraising is a little bit slow until the very end, but a little bit slower than usual this year.
Gotcha, okay. On the inspections, you mentioned that the new construction is starting to come online, and your inspections are starting to ramp up. Any concerns about being able to keep up with the inspections?
We are concerned. The deputy has made it very clear to all the developers that they can't come in and expect it to be done the next day. They have to plan and schedule accordingly, and we will bring in people to assist him as we need to, so.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chief. Any other questions or comments for the chief?
Not right now, I'll hold off till a little later on.
Okay.
Thank you. So the next thing I have for you is, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, yeah.
Is the ambulance rates. We're looking to increase the ambulance rates. I've given you a document that goes through it. It's from our billing company. It explains where we're at, what the recommended is for, so they give you the Medicare amounts on the Town of Walpole 2020 rate change form, which is in my packets, 3 pages in, but it gives our current rates as well as what's allowed by Medicare. And then the middle column is what the average of the companies that Comstar represents. And I'm recommending that we go to that middle ground. I did do a comparison of 11 different communities around us, and some are close to that mark, some are quite far off from that mark. So we haven't increased our rates since 2017. Prior to that, it was 2013. So it's not something I come in and do on a yearly basis, but it is something that I feel we should keep current with every couple of years.
So just looking down the current rates, the bottom two, ALS Intercept B and the Extra EMT.
Yes.
Those don't have any average bundled rates with
Right,
them.
so what they have an amount for us when you look at what our current rates are, but in actuality, what that is we get 50% of what is collected. So an intercept is if we go with our ALS ambulance to another community that is running just a BLS truck, and we intercept with them to provide ALS services, we get 50%. The agreement is that we get 50% of what they collect.
Gotcha.
So if it's a Medicare patient and they only get $500, we get $250.
Okay, so it's all just
It depends on where they are in the scale of how they pay.
Just want to kind of look down the rates here for a second.
I will note that the specialty care transport, they have it as $3,908. Ours currently is $3,335.38. That is, we do not do specialty care transports. That's more of a transfer, and we only do emergency service. So
Gotcha.
that rate really doesn't apply to us. So if we wanted to keep that at the $33.35, we could. But the other ones that I would recommend that we increase would be the BLS emergency base rate, ALS emergency base rate, and ALS2 emergency base rate. Those are the 3 that we use all the time.
Any questions for the chief on the proposed ambulance rate increase for 2020?
Just without getting out my calculator, where did you say we fall in here for a percent increase?
I don't have that for you, I'm sorry.
Okay. This says Mass Boston's 1.7.
I left that piece of paper behind, I'm sorry.
Is that right?
And when was the last time we adjusted the rates, chief?
2007, March of 2017.
And when we did that, did we adjust it to the average bundled?
Yes, we did.
We did. So that's been our
It was about 200% over Medicare.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the new ambulance rates as recommended by Chief Daly.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 300. Thanks, chief. Okay, so now we'll move on to new business. The first one is a vote to change the directors for the German Club.
I'll make a motion to approve the change of directors for Boylston, Shoal, DBA, the German Club.
I'll second that.
And as I looked at this, it looks as though there's really one director that's being changed.
Yes,
The
that's
other
all.
4 are staying the same, right?
Yep,
The fee's been paid, all the paperwork appears to be in order,
yep.
certificate of good standing and so forth, so. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the change of manager for the German Club, change of directors for the German Club. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
300. Next, we have a vote for the use of the Adams Farm for a wedding.
Make a motion to approve the request to use Adams Farm for a wedding on June 27th, 2020.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
300. Now we have the vote for approval of livery to have permission to drive within the boundaries of Walpole.
Do we need one more for the?
You need the 1 day.
Oh, okay.
I'd make a motion to approve request for one-day wine and malt license at Adams Farm on June 27th, 2020, with police detail present 1 hour before the event and 1 hour after.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
300.
I'd make a motion to approve the request from Danny Corey to operate within the town of Walpole's boundaries.
I'll second that.
So this is a request to operate a livery service between Walpole and Logan Airport, as I understand it. Yeah. And
He
again,
was fingerprinted.
yeah, which we use our new fingerprinting equipment. And again, the paperwork's all in order. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
300. Okay. Next is our 40B comments to the ZBA for the Summer Street 40B.
Do we want to wait until, see if we get some more members here to do that?
Probably.
Suggestion.
And what I'd like to talk about on this one is the what we sent originally to the state on this to make sure that's fully incorporated. Plus, I feel as though we should have a little bit more discussion around the I'll call it a rotary down in South Walpole, down at the Common there, and how we should be looking at that in terms of traffic improvements and so forth. So let's hold on this until David and Nancy are, so we can get the full feedback, but that's where I'll be going with it. Okay, so then today we want to spend some time with the various chiefs, the Director of Public Works and Rick Mattson, to discuss budgeting and staffing, so for 2020 and also beyond. So who wants to go first? I don't think we have a particular batting order, although I guess Chief Bailey, you are technically listed first, so if you want to go first, we'll do that. And our intention here was we set this up as a workshop to go through the budgets and make sure that we, fully understand the various budgets as we go into town meeting, but more broadly to be thinking about overall direction and strategy. So as we think of a growing community and the need for more, in this case, fire support, what does that translate into, and how are you thinking about the future? Thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
Would you like to start with the current budget, Mr. Chairman, and then go
Yeah,
into...
let's start with the current budget and then work our way into the future. Perfect. Thank you, Chief.
So the current budget allows for the fire prevention lieutenant, which we've had actually in the budget for this year as well, but it'll be taking place come July 1st. And then my staffing has been increased up to and include 10 men per shift come July 1st. So, other than that, there were really no issues with the recommendations as made by the town administrator.
Hey, Nancy, how are you?
If anyone has anything specific. that they'd like to question me on.
First of all, I would just comment that I think it's good that we're up to the 10 persons per shift at this point. I think
agree.
that's really, really important, and probably more that we need to be thinking about. Also, glad to see that we've got the lieutenant coming on as of July 1. So I think those are two very important steps in the overall staffing equation. So glad to see all that. I'll hold further comments on that until we get into the future discussion.
Sure.
Any questions or comments for the chief on current budget?
No, I agree with what you said, so.
Nancy, just to catch you up, we've gone through the appointments, so we covered the quarterly update with both chiefs. We voted to approve the new ambulance rates. We then went through the new business and did 1, 2, and 3. We held off on the 40B comments because we thought it would be sensible to have everybody here.
Okay.
David and Jim are just down the hall. They'll be here shortly, okay?
All right, sounds good.
So we're now into workshop mode here with the fire chief. Okay, so let's talk about the future now.
So what I've given you is a packet that I put together for this evening. I've had this actually sitting around for a while, and I've made some adjustments to it. Some of it I'll go into in depth. Others parts of it is just for your information. So if you look at the second page, it just gives the outline of where the department is today. You can see that I have the vacancies on the bottom of Group 1, Group 4, and the Fire Prevention Lieutenant. Those are not filled at this time. That's why there's no name associated with them. When we do make the Fire Prevention Lieutenant, one of the 2 10-man groups will move up, and that's where the 3 that'll be coming before you on the 24th will fill in. So the next page is just a deployment schedule of what NFPA 1710 is. And that is what is required of us for a reported structure fire and to have on scene within 8 minutes. As you can see, it says 15 personnel are required. The diagram itself is a little blurry, but if you look at the 4th page, it starts to explain what 1710 is, and it goes into detail what each one of the positions are. As you scroll through the next couple of pages, you'll see each one is labeled with what the assignments are and how they come up with that 15. After you've gone through that part of 1710, we get into where I'd like to spend a little bit of time. So the makeup of the town, and this was, I received this through the assessor's office, with the different types of properties that we have. We have 6,559, and this was done last May, June-ish, so some of the data may have been updated since then. Single-family homes, 6,559, condominiums, 420, and it goes right down the list of everything that we have, for a total of 12,488 structures that we protect, or 10,022 units. So the units is a different number, because if you take out the outbuildings, which is 4,600, it gives a better reflection of the units, because you may have an apartment building, but it may have 6 units or 12 units. So the units varies from what the actual structures are. Development projects on the next page is with what is being built currently. Some of it is also being proposed. 1034 East Street, 152 units, 95 West. Fairfield Inn, Home to Suites. The thing to keep in mind with Fairfield Inn and Home to Suites is those are filled more often than not at approximately, I believe, a 50% level. So there's always people in those as well. So we have to treat those as, potential residents as well. Cricket Lane, 995 Old Post, which is where Dunkin' Donuts is. There's 3 new commercial buildings there in the last 2 years. 333 Coney Street, which is Siemens. That has become like a little city down there. It's very large in nature. We went and did a tour down there last week of just the construction area, and we were there for almost 2 hours. It's quite the facility when you get inside and you really start walking around to see what is actually in there. Fillmore Lane, which is off of Pine Street. Homestead Estates, Roscommon, those are, one is the front half of that, and then the Roscommon is on the back side of it. Those are off of Fisher Street. Walpole Woodwork is 186, 1 and 2 bedroom AQV. Eastover Road, Renmar Ave, which is the 103 units, which will be going in up off of West Street. The hotel at the rear of Applebee's is still an active process. Burns Ave is still an active process. So what you can see there is just the list of things that are potentially coming online. Some of them are ready to come online, some of them haven't even started yet, but I felt it was important to throw them on to the list of potential. What that list does is it creates an additional, and I was very modest with the numbers that I associated, even with the 3 and 4 bedroom units. I just put 2 to every household or every unit, and that comes up to about 2,500 additional residents. That number could be higher, could be a little lower, depending on who moves into what. The next page is just a picture to just show the sheer size of some of these developments. This one here happens to be on West Street in the earlier construction phases. Looks a lot prettier today than it did in that picture. It just shows the vastness of that building compared to the engine which is parked below it. Page that I'd like to get into a little bit is the next one. So when I did this, our population was at 25,142. I do not know where that stands now. That's actually a floating number that floats around a little bit. We do know that it's going to go up and going to increase. Currently, Walpole is at 1.58 firefighters. That's what our ratio is per 1,000. When you take, I had asked NFPA to run the numbers for me, and that's what the other numbers that you see there. So our population is 25,142, and then I have increased it by 1,000 on each one of those. The hours of work, which is how they calculate it through their database, is done in 2 different segments. The 40 to 45 hour segment, we work 2 24-hour shifts a week. So there's 48 hours. It's when you do it over the course of the year, it averages out to 42 hours a week. That's why I gave you both numbers. I feel it should be the 46 to 51, but even at the 40 to 45, you can see that we're behind the numbers where we should be at. So at 25,142, at 2.07 in the 40 to 45 hour, it comes out to 50. We should have 52 personnel on shift now, which puts us about 12 behind where we are, or where we will be in another month, couple months. That would give us 13 per shift. 13 per shift would allow us to run at 11 and have 2 floats, which is what I've been asking for, which would allow us to put a second engine into service and possibly open up Station 2 to run that other engine out of Station 2. As you can see on looking at the numbers, they just jump down incrementally, and per each 1,000, that number goes up a little bit more. I've highlighted those on the right-hand column for you and what the per shift is. If you took the 48 hours a week that we work, that number goes up dramatically to the numbers that I've mentioned before, which was 16. That would allow us to have 2 engines in service and the tower in service. With 16, drop to 14, and be able to staff all of our apparatus for what we have. On the, if you could just flip to the last 2 pages. So Walpole is, ever since I've been chief, and probably before, we compare ourselves to a list of communities that I've received through personnel, that they do all of their comparisons to. There's 26 communities on that list, and what you see is the list of communities that are there that they compare us to. So what I've done is I've reached out to all of them, and I did a survey based on the comparable communities of what they had. And at the time, this was to do the fire prevention officer that we did get approved. And I just gave this to you again for informational purposes. What I've done on the last page, which is the colored page, is I've broken down those numbers for you based on that survey. And based on that survey, we are in population, we're the 12th largest out of the 26 comparable communities. On the budget, we're the 22nd out of 26. We're extremely low on the budget end of it compared to the other 26 communities. On area, we're the 8th largest of the 26 communities. And then on the last two columns, I broke down where those communities sit with regards to both the 2.3 that we talked about a few minutes ago and the 2.7, which is the ratios that they have per 1,000 firefighters in a career department. In that, there's 13 out of the 26 that meet the 2.07, and there's 4 out of those 26 that meet the 2.43. So I felt that this information was important for you to consider and look at to increase the staffing within the fire department. So how do we get there? So if you flip back 2 pages, 3 pages, there's a thing called the Fire Safer Grant through FEMA, and that will be coming out at the end of the month. And with the Safer Grant, they will fund the first 3 years of your firefighters at 75%, 75%, and then 35%. They will only do the salary-associated benefits. They do not do the gear end of it. And it's all 3 years is based on first year of what it would cost for a new firefighter. So the incremental cost of the steps would be borne by the town as well in years 2 and 3. What I would need from you, from the board, would be your consideration, and I don't need an answer tonight, but a consideration of how you would like me to proceed with that grant when it does open up in the next, they're saying within the month. So they give us about a month window to apply for that grant. The grant has to meet the requirements of 1710, which is why I provided that to you in the beginning of the document. And any consideration that you could give to me applying for that grant and using that to help us get a jump start on future hires would be appreciated. And I'll answer any questions that you may have.
So I like the idea of the Safer Grant. The fact that it's tied to 1710 is interesting. So if you come back to the one with the two
Yes.
breakdowns of the hours, trying to think in terms of what that means in terms of additional staffing in order to get to where you need to be under the 2 scenarios, to think about what that then translates into in terms of future staffing and how the Safer Grant plays into that.
So the Safer Grant can be done in a bunch of different ways. We can actually do it in concurrent years where we do so many this year, so many the next, so many the next. The only issue with that is whether or not the federal government continues to fund the grant program. They've been doing so for the last 7 or 8 years, so hopefully that continues. But that's the only real drawback, would be that the program would end and then we'd just be back to having to do it ourselves. So
if I just
and on those numbers, so
yeah.
I think we're better off taking it in obviously for financial reasons, taking it in smaller bites.
Yeah.
So if we could get a second engine up and running, that's my goal right now, and we're partway there. I need 11 working every day in order to make that happen. We'll be at 10. However, we dropped to 8. So once we get to a certain number, then we would have to look at changing the minimum staffing per day, but we're not there yet.
So I'm still trying to get my mind wrapped around the population, 1710, and what the shortfall is. These population numbers here, are these projections based on what's coming online?
Right. So if you take that 2,500 that I mentioned, that'll put us at 27.5, 27.6.
Okay. And so
That's why I broke it out to 28,000.
and if I look at, I think you said you think the 46 to 51 hours.
Well, it's based on the fact that we work 48 hours
Yeah.
a week. But if we went back and did it on the yearly average, which is 42 hours a week, we would fall under that's why I gave you both scenarios.
So again, just thinking about compliance to 1710, because the Safer Grant is contingent upon that, right?
Right. So what that is it's as long as we're working towards getting to what 1710 asks that you respond in time fashion, that's what they're looking for, is that you're trying to get to that benchmark.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's no time limit on how fast you get to that benchmark. It's just that they won't award the grant unless you're trying to get to that benchmark.
Okay.
And the other part of the benchmark is that those staff that you hire have to be able to do they can't be just ambulance personnel. They have to do 50% of the firefighting. All of our personnel do way above that because they're cross-trained and they both do the ambulance and the fire. So we respond to whatever call happens to come in, and that's how we handle it. So
Okay.
so like to take the house fire last week, for instance, all personnel were committed at the scene. So if we need an ambulance, we rely on mutual aid. So, or off-duty personnel that may have come back to the station, but.
So if the goal is to get another engine online, how many people what does that translate into in terms of people?
I need to have 11 on shift
Yep.
every day. Right now, it's 8.
8.
We'll be staffing at 10. In order to get to 11, though, if we went to 11, say you gave me 4 more and we went to 11 come July 1, that still doesn't really help because now I'm man for man, and we've seen in the past that man for man doesn't work because the overtime cost goes through the roof. You need to get to that 12, 13, so that you have a float to cover vacations, sick, and don't have that overtime as bad issue. Overtime's never going to go away, but it's...
Other questions for the chief? Mark?
Yeah, I would jump in. We've talked about the SAVER grant in the past. I'm very much in favor of that. I like the whole program. I wish it was funded at the higher percentages that it used to be funded at.
Right.
But I'm also sort of an incrementalist and would love to see us at least go for 4 firefighters, meaning 1 for each shift, get us up to 11, and then take another look at it next year. Maybe we could think and be a little more aggressive and go for 2 firefighters a shift, but that's kind of a big jump in 1 year. So I personally would be committed to, if we could go for the 4, 1 for each shift, come back and talk about it again next year and maybe do the same thing. I see with all the growth we have, especially the new apartment complexes, Siemens, I do think it is important to be able to run that second engine along with the ambulances, and just the number of people through the door on a vehicle I think is important. And I think Walpole always has been tight with a nickel, and I think that's why, as we look back at the trend, we've been understaffed, I guess is the right word, for years, and we're working our way. This year getting to 10 on each shift I think is big, and I'd love to see us go to at least 11 for next year.
Great.
Ben?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Chief, I really appreciate you putting all of this together. I know you spent a lot of time with FinCom, and this is kind of dragging the show around town, so I really appreciate it. It's a lot of really good data-driven info on what we need to be doing to meet the minimums that are recommended here, so thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Thanks, Chief. I always like to look at Canton because I just feel like they're so similar to us in size and land mass and everything like that. And to note that they have 40, and then I just jumping down, Mansfield, same thing, 40, Wakefield, 50. I know that they don't have the building that we're having. Like, I think that I'd even be willing to go to 6 the first year and then do 2 later, because then that does also give him that float option that he was looking for. Because otherwise we don't even have it yet. And so will we be spending money on overtime? And then that kind of just will throw off the budget a little.
Yeah.
And then we get at least halfway there. And then the following year do it. And what if they don't offer the SAFE grant again? That's my thought, all that building, all these houses, all these apartments, and the thought of someone going into those buildings, like, that is just unbelievable.
Chief, if I go back to what you said in your quarterly update, you cited statistics from last year. What was the daily number of runs that you did?
Well, the way I calculate it is calls for service just for the whole year. It's a combination of everything, but we had 3593 on emergency runs.
And so what does
And when you calculate all the inspections and all the man hours that are involved with everything else, that got us to the 7,000 and change. It was 21 point something calls for service.
So if I just focus in on the emergency...
That number continues to go up.
But just focus on the emergency runs. How many were there? How many was that?
3593.
3593, so that's what? 10 a day, basically?
Yeah, that's what we're averaging about that today.
Do you know, I don't know if you track statistics, but are there times where you have overlaps in terms of, when the crew is out handling an emergency event and you get a second call? Do you know how many times that happens?
So our new IMC program doesn't track that. Our old firehouse program did, and it was consistently 25% of our calls overlapped.
And so if I go back to...
We have a tremendous amount of overlap. I mean, they were out today, and we actually had to use mutual aid. I mean, it happens all the time.
So somewhere in here, you talked about the 8-minute requirement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I can spot it here.
The 8-minute requirement is from the time the call is received by us, roll out, which is a minute, on scene, and then having that first line deployed all within 8 minutes.
Do we know how often we meet that?
We don't.
In
It
fact,
takes me a while to get 15 people on scene. That's why I have Norwood Fire is automatic on any reported structure fire with us.
So you don't, when you say you don't, it's not, you didn't say you don't know it, you said you don't make it.
We don't make 8 minutes,
Yeah,
no.
okay.
We do very well
Yeah.
with what we have.
Yeah. Okay.
We have a very good staff, so.
Other questions for the chief? David?
I know, first of all, I apologize, I was late. I was at the school buildings committee meeting and tried to leave at the right time, but didn't quite. But you mentioned the float, and you may have addressed this earlier. Does the contract allow somebody who's not assigned to a regular shift to come in when you have...
Like a provisional? No. We used to draw from the call department that way and use provisionals after a certain amount of time, but we don't have the call department anymore, so.
Is that, and it's not allowed under the contract, is that something that we can...
No, so what we currently have is, right now I have 2 groups of 9 and 2 groups of 10 on paper. Come July 1, those will be all filled. I'll be coming before the board on the 24th to fill the other 3 vacancies that we have. That, after July 1, then I have to get those members in the academy, so it'll be a little bit, and then once they get out of the academy, we'll have 10 on a group. Minimum staffing is 8, so you'll have 2 on each group that will cover vacation and sick. That's
All right.
personal time.
Anything else, David? No, that's it. And what I would like to see perhaps when the town administrator comes back is perhaps we can do a cost analysis showing how much extra money the new buildings have generated, and look at that and see how, that's some of the money we should be looking at, is saying, okay, it's fair to spend a good portion of that on public safety responsibilities. And I think, if we look at that, I think there'll be a net positive. I think there's enough money there coming in, new money, that we certainly need to devote to the public safety end.
Other questions for the chief? In terms of coverage of the town, if you had 2 engines, and if if we get to that point, do you have any sense for how often you'd make the 8 minutes?
It would increase for sure. Oh, I mean, we always have someone on scene within that 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting to that 15 is, it's very difficult to get to that within.
Where I'm going with the question is, we've got the fire station in the center of town.
Yes.
But Walpole's a big town.
Yes.
And so to get to the far reaches, no matter where you are, it takes a certain amount of time. And I remember back in the days when Chief Erickson was here, we would talk about getting up way up into North Walpole,
Mm-hmm.
that was 8 minutes all by itself just to drive up there.
It is.
Never mind get on scene and be prepared to...
Correct. So we have an automatic agreement with the town of Westwood. Anything down to Brook Street is an automatic response by them to supplement us. So we do have agreements like that in place in certain areas. That's predominantly the biggest one, but...
So what I think I'm hearing, based on the dialogue that the board has had, is there is, I think, there's clear support that we're going to, with a growing population, with more structures, bigger structures too, more complicated structures, some commercial, but a lot of residential, that there is I think, a consensus that seems to have emerged here that we need to do something. I think David's point about the incremental revenue that comes in from the town based on the new buildings is an obvious way to think about how we fund it. The SAFER grants, though, are also an obvious way to fund it. What I like about the SAFER grants is it allows us to get up and running with the new resources and then gradually bring them in, and that would dovetail nicely with as the additional revenue comes in from the new buildings. So I would suggest that you come back to us with a proposal to say, I heard 4, I heard 6. What's the right number of additional firefighters that we should be putting on? I think with the goal of getting a second engine going, so that would mean a minimum of 4, and then you've got that float question. So, and if you could come back to us with a proposal for that, then I think that then we could debate that a little bit and see where we want to go.
Sure.
Does that make sense to everybody on the board?
Sure, yep.
Okay.
So would you like me to do that on the 24th as well?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chief. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
So, Chief Carmichael, you want to go next? And while the chief is doing that, I want to, because we started at 6:30, which is an odd time today, so I wanted to reiterate what I said on the front end about the Friends of St. Patrick event, because they're trying to get the word out that the Friends of St. Patrick event, which is the annual luncheon held at this time of year, was scheduled to be this Friday at Ambrosia's in Foxborough, has been canceled. And so I want to make sure we get the message out to all those who might be planning to attend. So I wanted to announce it again here at about 7:30, knowing that we've got more people watching now. And I also said earlier that there'll be more information coming forth about, how we're going to handle, the cancellation and what that means to all people who bought tickets and so forth and so on. So much more to come. But the most important thing is to know that it's been canceled for this Friday. Chief.
Sir, thank you. So before getting into the budget issues, I know that you wanted me to mention the Asher training. So just to give a quick highlight, over the past 2.5 years, the Walpole Police Department partnered with our schools to create a critical incident response for situations that might require an evacuation, a lockdown, a lockout, a shelter in place, different types of responses to different types of things that might occur. In response to that, we trained 7 of our police officers to be trained in ALICE, Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate, which is a national protocol. It's suggested to be used by the Department of Education at the federal level as well as the state level. We worked with the schools to get them trained on the online training. Every school teacher and staff member in Walpole has been trained in that. Then we created our own ALICE protocol, which is age appropriate. So we have a different protocol for elementary school as opposed to middle school and high school. We've incorporated all of that. We made videos with the help of Mr. Peter O'Fallon at the high school. We've done all that. That's all in place. A lot of different mechanisms as far as security of the school that we've implemented, such as the go bags are in all the classrooms, 911 system, phones that can go right into dispatch, the radio interoperability that they now have. So a lot of things have taken place over the past couple of years to get us to the point where we are right now. And the last thing we did was to conduct shelter-in-place drills with all the schools. And we just did that, and we hope to do another drill before the end of the year. The next phase of what we want to do is called ASHER, and that's Active Shooter Hostile Event Response. ALICE is a very broad critical incident response. ASHER is our public safety, our first responders, and how they respond to an active shooter drill or a major mass casualty incident. And so we've trained, we work with the fire department, we have a multidisciplinary response, and the whole purpose of ASHER is to get us on the same page to work together in case of our worst case scenario, and that the police will go into the schools. We're trained on how we're supposed to approach it and how we're supposed to make entry. But what the national trend is now is to train the fire department to go in with us to the warm zone. So after the situation is somewhat stabilized, but not all the way. And go in there, and it's basically to stop the bleed and to try and get people out, casualties that might be injured, and kind of triage that out and go through a process of getting them to the hospital and moving that scene into a cold scene. And if you've looked at what's happened around the country, when these situations happen, they're extremely dynamic, and they are a community's worst nightmare. And they go on for days and days, and even years. In fact, the Henry Pratt shooting that was in Aurora, Illinois, this time last year, a little bit around that time, they're still dealing with the aftermath. And so we're looking at it, myself, Chief Bailey, and members of each department, that if we're going to task our people to go into deadly situations like this, we need to train them on it. And it's not something that we usually budgeted for, but it's something that we may come, before the board to help us fund that next phase of training for this year. And then Jim has already helped us with funding that in our budgets for next year. And so that's going to be a priority for us and a goal that we'd like to accomplish. As far as our budget coming up.
Before you move off of that, though,
Sure.
What exactly do you need from us in terms of getting that training completed this year? I know it sounds like you've got it budgeted for next year, but not this year.
Right.
So what is it that you need from us?
So this phase would be about another 8 hours of training, and that would incorporate all of the police officers, all the firefighters, and our communications, our dispatchers. And it's half the day is is instructional, and then the other half the day is some practical exercises where we're working as task force response teams. We're working together to go in and we do these different scenarios just to try and get reps, is really what we're doing. And then next year, in phase 3, that will be a much broader critical incident where, we're talking about unified commands and command posts, and, involving the rest of the town and the resources, and that's what kind of everybody is going to be at the table, and to deal with some type of mass casualty event that would take place. And so for the police department, just for that day of training would probably be around $5,000 to $10,000. And I know, and speaking with Chief Bailey, they would probably need around 12 to get this thing done and get phase 2 out of the way.
So somewhere around $20,000 is a fair number to work with.
Yes.
Jim?
I had a feeling. I've already talked to both chiefs about this. I've started before yesterday. I had this and everything else covered under Article 5 funded. And with the things that have kind of happened obviously with the coronavirus, it's thrown a wrench into my plans a little bit. I'll get into that later on today, but as of yesterday afternoon, I had budgeted about $5,000 for police and then just about $13,000 for fire under Article 5. I identified the funds mostly coming from some old projects that are closed out and some overlay money, because we have a couple of other items that are under there. Veterans budget's running over by $10,000, $20,000. Legal, we're going to need some money in there. Board of Health, we had an unexpected staff person retire about 2 months ago, and I said to Melissa, why don't we just see how we're doing through the month of April? I wasn't going to fill it, but given everything that's going on, I want to fill it. It's only about $5,000. So there's a variety of items that total about $118,000 or so, and I had them funded. It included these two things. So
Okay, good.
under the in-year budget adjustment article.
Good, okay. So that means you should be able to complete the training this year, and then, again, you've got it budgeted for next year already.
Yes, sir.
Good, okay, awesome. Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Any more questions on that particular item? Okay, so then, so our budget for next year, the three major components that we're looking to accomplish is, the first is increasing police personnel. That's our number one priority. The police department, we just did hand out the updated strategic plan. The Walpole Police Department, over many years, I know the 23, 24 I've been here, as well as Chief Stillman before me, used to talk about when he came on in 1977, I think it was. We had a certain amount of officers, going back then. had about 38, 39 officers, and then over his tenure, the highest we ever got to was 40, 41. And those numbers have basically stayed stagnant for years. It's only been the past couple of years where Jim's been able to find us the money in the budget to increase our staffing up to 44 officers. And those officers, the 3 of them are still in the police academy right now. So going forward next year, we've asked for an additional 3 to bring our numbers up to 47 officers. And essentially what we're trying to do is the U.S. Department of Justice, they have average amounts of police officers that are, in each department. Typically around here, you'll see that average range from 1.3, 1.4, all the way up to 2.4 officers per 1,000 people. Similar to what Chief Bailey was just talking about, Walpole right now with the 44 officers has about 1.7, and that's an increase of the 2 that we got last year, where we were at about 1.6. So going forward, what we need to do is try and stay at least incrementally with the growth that we're experiencing. And as you know, it takes a while to train police officers. By the time we get them into the police academy, it's 26 weeks in the academy, then there's 12 weeks of FTO, plus the stuff leading to the academy where psychological screening, medical screening, PT tests, all that stuff. It takes a long time. It can take a year to actually make a police officer by the time they're molded for the street. So we want to try and stay ahead of that. I think that's what the goal is right now. Getting us up to the 47 officers next year will bring us up to about 1.8, 1.9 officers per 1,000. And then if you look through that strategic plan that we've provided over the next years, as the growth occurs, we want to, we need to make sure that we're adding to that. So next year there would be the additional 3 officers. We also want to increase the command staff, so that's part of that as well, where we would create another lieutenant, where you would have the chief, deputy chief, and 3 lieutenants. And part of why we need to do that is currently we have to, many times we use a sergeant as an administrative function, and that sergeant is the same rank and many times has less tenure than the other sergeants, and the police department is structured so that there's command and control and there's a chain of command, and when directives are given through that sergeant to another sergeant, it's not really in line with how we operate. And so we want to have that 3rd lieutenant being in charge of the 3 major components of the department: patrol, investigations, and administration. And if you look in the back of the strategic plan, you'll see our organizational chart and basically how the police department is broken down and how it functions. I think it's actually like close to the last page. Right, like the 3 or 4 pages on the back. So that's the organizational chart and kind of how the department flows. So that is very important for us to move forward. We want to be ahead of that as well, and as the department grows, have people in charge of those specific tasks. And the next issue for next year is crossing guards. We currently have 7 crossing guards scattered throughout Walpole for the 6 elementary and middle schools. It's really not enough. There are some other places where I would really like to see crossing guards. Places that come to mind: East and Elm Street, that's one location. There's one on one side of the bridge, or like one on this side of the bridge. OPR has 2 crossings, so the 1 crossing guard is kind of bouncing back and forth. East High Plain and Wash is another place where we have kids, sometimes they're just starting out in front of vehicles, and it'd be nice to have somebody posted there. But we got 1 in there, so there's 1 in for the budget next year. We'll figure out where the best place to put that crossing guard would be. But it's one of the things we get a lot of complaints about, where there's a lot of requests from residents that do want some more crossing guards. So that's something that we'd like to work on. And so that would be
when we think of the South Street 40B and the concern that we as a board have around student safety. Are you envisioning crossing guards down at that at that railroad crossing as well?
I would. We did kind of request it from the builder that they would maybe help supply a crossing guard there. The crossing guards, they run about $70,000 a year
Yep.
to post one. But the good thing is down at that location there's some safety mechanisms in place. We do want to keep pushing for the high vis signalization for crossings like down in the square there. It's just to make sure that kids have that full route of getting from home to school without any problems with crosswalks and crossings and that sort of thing. Certainly, I prefer.
Just to chime in on that too, they have agreed tentatively to install those solar crosswalks that we have around town in a couple of different places. And just, the chief touched upon this, we have asked them, they haven't said no, as to whether they could pay for that in perpetuity. They kind of chuckled at it, and I said, no, we're serious. I'd like to see you build it into your home association fees there, because it's going to be 60 condos down there, and build it into your rental fees for the 240 there. They were reluctantly, didn't say no, but we're going to push them hard on it. I mean, the chief is pretty adamant there, and I'm adamant that they should cover the funding. Their argument is, well, we're paying property taxes and building fees and everything else on top of that, but so we're pushing them on that. Sorry to interrupt.
So we didn't, we were waiting to get the full board here, so we didn't cover our comments to the ZBA yet on that 40B. So when we come back around on that, we should talk about this and whether that should be included or not.
Okay. So also in the back of the packet on the strategic plan as well, so you'll see multiple charts in the back. And what we did, similar to what Chief Bailey was talking about, we did some comps on area departments, and we measured ourselves against other communities as far as population, UCR Part 1 crimes, which are uniform crime reporting. Those are basically all the crimes that are reported that are entered, and we send those to the FBI. If you look at that one, Walpole's comparably, we're close to the top, or like the 7th down. We sorted our command staff by the number of lieutenants, where we actually rank fairly low. We're below the middle for the size of our department. We have sworn officers, and we broke that down into officers per capita, that 1.7, 1.8 where we are now, and compared to other communities. We compared ourselves to per capita officers, that ratio, and square miles, 911 calls. Some of the other comparisons are for fleet. The fleet will be an issue coming up in the future, so where we rank as far as our fleet compared to other communities. And then population, and total sworn officers, per capita. And so we did a lot of comparisons between Walpole and other crime. We've looked at violent crime as well. We have Part 1 crimes, which are basically, your robbery, homicide, rape, burglary, those, your more major type of crimes. We've compared ourselves to those, just so we have a better idea of not just this ratio that DOJ looks at it for an average, but for other measures that we have in comparing ourselves to other communities. So just to give you an idea on that, so essentially the budget next year is increased staffing, increased command staff, crossing guards, and then in the future, our strategic plan would address a couple other things that have really lingered on way too long, frankly. One is increasing the minimum staffing on shifts. We currently work with 1 sergeant and 3 police officers on a shift. We outgrew that years ago. And one of the things I'll draw your attention to is there you'll see a little map in the strategic plan that has the 4 sectors. Essentially, the officers on the shift are assigned to geographic sectors. There's 4 sectors. Sometimes we use 5 with Route 1. When we have 3 officers and a sergeant working a shift, 1 officer's in Sector 1, 1's in 2, and the other one is sometimes covering 3 and 4. And if you look at the distance in 3 and 4, you could be at Walpole Prison, or you could be up on 109, and that's a very large area for one police officer to cover, especially when we have a domestic going on, a mental health call, and a crash. So there's a lot of times, like fire, we're spread thin. And so we need to start thinking about increasing that minimum staffing on our shifts to at least 4 officers and a sergeant. So that is part of our strategic goal, increasing staffing. The next one is eliminating the officer in charge. We have many times right now, when the sergeant can't fill in for the shift, like so if a sergeant is sick or sergeant on vacation, we have to fill that shift. Many times we'll have to fill that shift with a patrol officer because the 8 sergeants, they didn't take it or they're not eligible for it, whatever the case may be. And so a police officer will end up being in charge of the shift. Now, that could be a Saturday night with a police officer that has 2 years' experience. And, you know, the police department, I would argue, is probably the highest liability department in the town because, you know, we can arrest and the civil rights issues, and there's a lot of different things that we face that can affect what we do as far as liability. And we really need to start making sure that every shift is covered with a sergeant, with a supervisor, an experienced person who's able to make you know, better decisions and that type of thing. And so that's something that we need to start moving towards. The next thing is achieving certification accreditation. We've started that, as you know, with the old station. We've tried and failed. We're not able to even get waivers because of our building and where we were. But accreditation standards in Massachusetts is 300 standards. We think we can meet them all, especially in our new building, and we're already looking at that, and we've started doing it. Our command staff is working on that. The Deputy Lieutenant Zangetti is getting our files ready, and we're moving towards that so that we can be an accredited police department in Massachusetts. Increasing the fleet, that has to just go along with growth, right?
Before you come off of that one, so in terms of the, you know, certification and accreditation, you've got in here where you talk about the accreditation for law enforcement agencies provides a shield for costly liability, sets the bar and creates, you talked about some of the reasons that we would want to do this and the benefit to the town. Can you say a few more words around that, especially that first one, provides a shield for costly liability?
Sure. Well, so as you know, like the department, right now we currently have about 100, close to 100 policies and procedures that deal with a lot of different things. Many of them are low frequency, high liability events. Bank robbery, we have a policy on bank robbery. We have policies on the things that pursuit. You know, what exactly are the things that you should do if you're involved in a pursuit? When should the pursuit be called off? When do you allow it to proceed? You know, there's many, and inside of those policies there are cited accreditation standards that have to be implemented in the policy, and they don't only have to be implemented in the policy, they have to be practiced. They have to be something that we do every day. And the policies, we've been creating those policies and implementing those for the past few years now. We have our rules and regulations in place, our policies and procedures, our general orders, and when you establish standards like that and you follow those standards, it reduces the liability of the things that we have to deal with. If we're involved in a pursuit and we don't follow the policy, then, you know, there's an issue internally, but we have a standard and a standardized approach in how we do it. Okay. So it in many ways it reduces the liability. It helps us with grants. It helps the town with pride that you have an accredited police department, a legitimate department that's you know, that's able to follow those standards.
Thanks, Chief.
Increasing the fleet is, you know, the motorized fleet is just something that, as the department increases in size, we're going to have to, you know, have officers that are assigned to a cruiser so that they can, or whatever it is, you know, we have school resource officers, we have detectives, these guys are all over the place, moving around at different schools and different locations. We need to make sure that the fleet is able to handle that. Enhanced training, as I mentioned, our biggest issues right now are our mental health training and the ASHA training. The ALA stuff is pretty much done. That's all going to be maintaining it from this point on. But training, I can't even emphasize enough how important that is. You know, we have to train our officers, especially in policing. It's changing constantly. Stuff that happened last year doesn't happen anymore. Things, you know, it's constantly evolving, and there's these different emerging things that come into play. The opioid crisis, and hopefully at some point we're not going to be talking about that all the time, and that will go with the mental health crisis that we're going through, and how we're dealing with that. That's the big thing right now. Hopefully at some point that will be something that you know we get a good handle on. So things like that, and then information technology. That's going to be our big one. Our department is so technology driven now. Our radio system, our 911 system, the recording system, the cameras, everything is so complex that at some point in the future we're going to need an IT guy. Joe Zangetti is very good with computers, but he'll be the first one to tell you he's not trained to be a computer guy. He's just very tech savvy, and he's able to do it. But even the stuff that we have now, we have a company come in and help us, because our network is just so complex, and it's way beyond any typical police officer's ability to oversee it. And so that's pretty much it. The plan pretty much explains everything.
So on that full-time information technology employee question, it says we spend $99,000 to outsource 12 hours of service.
Right. Yeah. So what we do is we have a company that comes in, because you have to actually use companies that are you know, they're savvy to deal with police computer systems and all that kind of stuff. So we have this company come in. We pay them in 4-hour blocks. So each 4-hour block for the year is $32,000. And so yes, if we need at least 12 hours minimum, which would be about, you know, close to 100,000. And the way that we pay for that, you know, we do have some of that, and the budget pays for it, but we also use our 911 grant. So we're taking money from our 911 grant that used to go, when we were in the old building, it used to go towards fixing the dispatch area, because, you know, I was kind of trying to piecemeal things there. Now that we're in the new station, we don't really need that as much, so we take that money and we use it towards the IT guy to oversee all the radios and the computers and dispatch and our whole network.
And so you've got 12-hour coverage per week at $99,000 right now. For $81,000, you could get a full-time resource on doing this?
We could. And yeah, you'd have to, right now, like I said, we pay for most of the IT guy with the 911 money.
Right.
You know, we'd still have that money probably put, I don't know where we funnel that towards something else, like in the building, but yes, Jim, you know, we talked about it this year. You know, right now, this year wasn't the best year to do it, so that's why we put it in the strategic plan as something that we want to look.
Is it a full-time job?
It could absolutely be a full-time job, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So in addition to the 12 hours, Lieutenant Zangetti does a lot of the, you know, the daily, you know, uploads of different things, and you know, the less tech savvy type of stuff, and then the company Delphi comes in and helps us with everything else.
Okay. Any questions for the chief?
Could I follow up on the one you just asked, Jim?
Sure.
If you had a full-time IT person, how much outside assistance would you need over and above that? You know, I understand if a server crashes, sometimes you have to go outside.
I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. I think that what we were thinking of doing if we did get the IT person would be to get somebody that's already like in the industry and is working for police departments now. The people that work for Delphi, those kind of what they are. So some of those people have been known to branch off and just take a position in the department somewhere. As far as like how much we would need to, like, as a vendor to go outside. I don't know. Maybe keep the 4 hours or something a year and keep that through the grant. I don't know. I guess we could come up with some ideas for that.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for the chief? Ben?
No, I would just say, similar to what I said with Chief Bailey, I appreciate you putting all this information together, all the data. It's important not just for us, but all the residents to know as well what is driving this, why we need more officers, new equipment, and where all that money goes. So it's great information. I appreciate it.
Nancy? Dave?
I have a couple questions. So on the vehicle question, I forget how many marked vehicles you have, but why, can you just explain why the need for more marked vehicles?
Well, they run a lot. They get the maintenance issues. Our cruises, depending on how many people are on the ship, a lot of them run 24 hours a day. We have, I think we're up to 12 marked vehicles, 10 unmarked, and we have 3 motorcycles. The motorcycles help us tremendously because there's some shifts where we wouldn't have, they'd either be doubled up or something like that. So in the, obviously the traffic enforcement side of this. There are days right now still, and I know I've brought this up in the past, where we have police officers that are taking their own car. We have school resource officers sometimes that are taking their own car to a school or to court, prosecutor taking their own car to court, and that shouldn't happen. I mean, that's, if they get into a crash or something, or they get involved in a enforcement action or something like that, it's not the position that we want to be in. The department is very busy. When you look at our work chart there's a lot of different functions and a lot of different dynamic things that are happening all the time. People are all in all different locations doing a lot of different things. And so, increasing the fleet and making sure everybody has a way to get to where they need to get to and do their job is important.
So back to so with 12 marked cars, why is any one car being used 24 hours a day, or?
Are any of them being used 24 hours a day?
Yeah, I think. So how many cars do you need for a shift? 5? I think.
Yeah, we might need 5, maybe 6. And sometimes that's fine. Like that's good. There's other days where 2 or 3 of them need for a detail. They need they're hanging wires across Route 1 or something. You need a cruiser there. You guys have to go to Metro call-outs. You guys have to go to court. They're not, it's not always just the function of covering a patrol sector. There's a lot of other different functions. They might be going to training. They might be going to a funeral. Honor guard type of thing. So the cars are used for a lot of different things. And yes, there's days when there's cars that are available. There are days when they're not. Staying ahead of that. We did do a comparison between Walpole's fleet and other fleets around us. Franklin has 18 marked cruisers, 9 unmarked. And there's just different comparisons there. But hopefully the goal would be to make sure that we don't have an officer that's on a shift that's using their own car.
All right, thanks.
Get back to the sectors for a second, because I lost you a little bit on that. The map shows 4. You mentioned the 5th, and you referred to Route 1. Could you just go back through that again?
Sure. So depending on the manning on the shift, like if we say we have a sergeant and 5 officers on a shift, because there's different amount of officers in each squad. They work 4 days on, 2 days off, 24 hours a day, so the schedule gets complex. But our geocodes, our geo sectors, we have 4 essential sectors. So 1 is East Walpole, 2 is South Walpole from Route 27 down to like South Walpole, 3 is West Walpole, and then Sector 4 is North Walpole. the 1A and 27 are basically the geographic boundaries. So on a typical shift, if it's one sergeant, 4 officers, there's an officer in 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if there's a 5th one, sometimes what we'll do, they can do whatever they want. It's the sergeant's call. They might put the 5th guy in an unmarked car. They might put them on a motorcycle. They might put them on the ATVs that night. Or they might put them on Route 1. So Route 1 would become a sector for that night. And that officer's responsibilities become everything on Route 1. And any of the calls that come in here, they would respond to. So on a typical night, it's done by those geographic boundaries. On the nights when it's 1 sergeant, minimum manning, being 3 officers, that's when it gets a little dicey because we're too busy for that. We had over 20,000 incidents last year, and we get busy to the point where those 3 officers can be doing 3 different things. One could be at a domestic, which is not what we want, and the other 2 could be at a crash, or they could be assisting the fire department somewhere. So that they're stretched very thin, dangerously thin, I think, when we get busy and certain things happen.
And what about when there's an event like down at the stadium?
Well, we supplement, when the stadium events, we supplement that with detail officers.
Gotcha, okay.
That's always, that's been somewhat of a battle for the most part sometimes, but they've, the stadium has been accommodating as far as like giving us the manning that we need to at least move traffic to a certain degree, and to post officers on the other side of Route 1 in the preserve so that we have people on that side of the highway. And, so they've been accommodating with that.
So, any other questions or comments for the chief before we wrap? I guess my last question is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Are those in priority order?
Yes.
So I guess what I would be interested in, much like we asked Chief Bailey, is to come back with a plan. We asked him for a specific proposal. I think for you it's probably more about a plan that says over the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, how do you accomplish the 1 through 8? Like how would you factor that in, and what do we need to be thinking about if these are the strategic priorities? How do we need to be thinking about getting from where we are to where you believe we need to be?
Well, the grants, just like the fire department, every year we apply for the COPS grants, community-oriented police services, and we try and do is they have hiring grants, and we've tried every angle. We've tried the community policing side. They actually told us one day we'd do too much community policing, and they weren't going to give it to us. We were all set. There was some were just hiring grants. Some were for school resource officers. So every year we're making those applications out, and we think we have very strong applications. Walpole just historically has not been able to secure COPS grants for some reason. They'll end up in Holyoke and Taunton, we'll get them, or something like that. But it's been hard for us. We have gotten them in the past years ago. We got an SRO grant, but it's we continue to apply for every grant that we can that's out there that we can try and get. The other things, manning is just those are going to be all budgeting issues. Like I said, the grants would be nice if we can secure some of those. Officer in charge, those are more of, once we do have the manning, we may, we have enough sergeants to cover all of the shifts, so we can move away from eliminating that officer in charge, or at least reducing it to a point where we're not doing it so much. Certification accreditation, we're working on that right now. We're driving forward with that. Increasing the fleet, that's more budget stuff. Other things do help us, bicycles, the ATVs, other alternative modes, walking, whatever we can come up with. And then the training issues, budget again, and the IT person as well. That's it's a budget thing. You know, like I said, right now, the grant's helping us with IT, but in the future, it's not cost effective really to be paying that much when we might be able to get somebody for less money.
Well, thank you, Chief. This is really good, and I appreciate you spending the time taking us through all this detail. You know, Ben made the point earlier about having this detail at our fingertips for not only our purposes, but for educating the public on, you know, overall strategy and direction, and why it's important that we achieve what we need to, what you're asking for in order to protect the town. So I really appreciate you coming in tonight and spending the time with us. It's been really helpful to me.
Thank you.
Okay. Rick. DPW Director Rick Mattson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think Jim's passing around an organizational and staffing assessment that was prepared for the DPW. I can tell you right now, we do not need a full-time IT person. All set with that.
Thanks for that.
But seriously, these the Department of Public Works is, as everybody knows, is an integral part of the town, of the community, just as police and fire. A lot of the things that, and a lot of the duties that they perform go unseen. A lot of people don't see them. They see the police, they see the fire. I would imagine everybody voted the other day, but nobody knows who set it up, who set the voting booths up and broke them down. Little things like that. Unlike police and fire, we're not directly affected by population. We're more affected by infrastructure that comes along with that population. Miles of road, infrastructure, structures, water pipes, sewer pipes, drainage pipes, things along those lines. The density of the apartments downtown really has no effect on us, as it does on these guys. We're primarily a service-oriented group. We provide service to the entire community and, to a lesser degree, the transient population of the town that traverse our roads. Trees are fast becoming a major issue, more so than road defects. So these are a lot of the things that people don't realize. And as you're aware, we recently purchased a tree truck, an aerial tree truck, long overdue, very valuable piece of equipment. We're trying to work it, and for the most part, we are working it every single day. But in all honesty, we don't have the staff to really dedicate to that, to use that piece of equipment the way it needs to be utilized. I think within that report, you'll see just the highway department, for example. In 1980, I believe the highway department had 14 full-time employees. Today, that level sits at 7, even though we've added 30 miles more of roadways. So we've progressively gone backwards over the years, to the point where we're down to a low, I think, of like 31 guys total in the DPW. Right now, we have 60 full-time employees in the DPW. That includes administration, clerical, and I believe we have 2 part-time and 3 seasonal employees. So the summer kids that come in to assist with the parks. The report that you have before you breaks down each of the divisions, their current duties, the current staffing levels, and the projected needs for the next 5 years. So that plan will carry us out to 2025. So basically what we're looking for is to add 10 full-time employees, 10 to 12 full-time employees in the various divisions over the next 5 years. One of the driving factors, of course, is going to be the construction and the maintenance of the new field complex. When you build a showcase piece of property like that, you need to maintain it. The biggest thing is the level of service that is expected of the townspeople we currently we operate on local policies and directives. We don't operate under NFPA, national, the FBI, the national crime. So we don't have a lot of statistics. But as you see, as you read through the, I believe you'll see there's like 3 in parks. I'm sorry, 3 in highway, up to 5 in parks and forestry. 1 in building maintenance, 1 in sewer and water, 1 part-time clerical, 1 in engineering, and an increase in hours in engineering. Again, we really, at times, we really struggle to fill our equipment. To the chief's point, our major crime would be a severe weather event. Okay, our working fire would be a major water break. So things along those lines. We do very well with what we have, I believe. We've got a great bunch of people that are dedicated, and again, we are at sometimes very, very understaffed, particularly in larger events. Now, additional personnel is not always the answer. Sometimes you can cross-train employees to go into other divisions. We have the ability to use outside contractors, but along with outside contractors come typically big bills. So we've looked at that, particularly in the park department. The quality of the employees that we're getting these days has increased greatly. They're very knowledgeable people, particularly in turf. So we're looking to eliminate some contractual services and utilize our own staff with the knowledge and the equipment. This town has been very good to us in terms of purchasing equipment over the past several years, and we've got a good fleet. That's very important to our operation, as is the the knowledge that these new employees have been bringing to us. So I really don't have much more to say, other than we could absolutely use some more help. I know we're competing for dollars. We don't have the ability to lean on COPS grants or fire grants. It's just not in the cards for Public Works anywhere. And in comparison, comparing one community to another, it's apples and oranges, because people run their Public Works functions differently. A lot of them rely heavily on contractors. Some don't rely on contractors at all. One unique thing that we have in our Public Works is the building maintenance department. A lot of towns, it's not part of Public Works. For the most part, they're typically handled by school departments or other facilities type operations. But of those employees right now I believe we have 46 rank and file employees in the DPW. 12 of those are in building maintenance. 4 of those 12 are custodians. 4 others dedicate the vast majority, if not all of their time, to the schools. So about 50% of the expense budget on the building maintenance side is dedicated to schools. 30% of the salary budget is dedicated to schools. So the number is kind of skewed when you look at the Public Works budget overall. If you include sewer and water, 30% of the overall Public Works budget goes to the MWRA assessment. 30%, which is ridiculous. But it's something that we don't have any control over.
So as I look at this, it appears as though the areas where you've got the biggest ask are in the highway department, Union Highway +3 between now and 2025. Union Parks on the Parks Department +5 between now and 2025. And then you've got, ones and halves in some other areas.
Correct. The three plus two in parks,
Yep.
3 of those would be dedicated to field maintenance.
Yep.
The other 2 would be dedicated to the forestry and trees. We currently have 8 people in parks, forestry, and cemeteries. 2 of those guys we'd like to dedicate to that tree truck,
Yep.
which only leaves, and 2 of them are in cemeteries, so that leaves the others to do the fields. Again, it's all about the level of service. I mean, if we're only going to cut the grass every 2 weeks, we'll be fine. But that level of service, I don't think that's the level of service that we're looking for.
Right. Questions for Rick?
You mentioned trees being a big issue right now. Is that because they're aging or they're too close to the road? Like, what's making that a big issue right now?
I think it's aging and the size that they've grown to in the aging process, and their proximity to structures and roadways. They're very close, our trees anyway, are very close, as you can imagine, to the roadways. The new park superintendent that we just hired, Justin Monta, he's gone out and he's basically started his own tree assessment, and he's made good progress on it, and he's identified a lot of trees that are going to be problematic soon. So we'd like to enhance that staff to address that. Now, again, we have the option of using an outside contractor for that. But I believe we just opened the bids. I think you guys just awarded the contract, and it was like, it comes out to like $1,200 or $1,300 an hour, which is ridiculous. That's kind of a specialty thing. Those guys need to be very well trained. You can't just send anybody to cut a tree. I mean, the tree cutting business is inherently dangerous, and if you do it wrong, somebody's going to get hurt. You certainly can't send one guy to do it.
Second question I have is just sort of the roads and the highways. I know depending on the winter, our roads and sidewalks are either better or worse. How do you feel we're doing on that? I know we allocate some extra money every year through town meeting for roadways and sidewalks and parking lots.
With the combination of the Chapter 90 money, which seems to be pretty well level funded, actually I believe the last assessment that we saw, Jim, it went down $5,000. So the state cut that a little bit. You're right, local funds, I believe we increased it from 200 to 400. I believe we had requested 900, it just wasn't in the cards. So the more that we can spend locally would go, a long way. The engineering and highway departments do road surface ratings every year. That's how we determine which roads we're going to pave, which ones we're going to postpone. And it all really comes down to dollars. You take your worst roads and you try to stretch the dollar as long as you can. We've used the chip seal process in the past. I got to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of the chip seal. I don't like it, particularly in neighborhoods. So we're going to try something a little bit different this year. We're not going to do the chip seal. We're going to just use a leveling course and see if we can preserve our roadways that way. But to answer your question, Mark, if we could get even 200,000 more, get $500,000 a year, that with the Chapter 90 would take us a long way, and we'd make better progress. We do pretty good now with what we have. Our pricing's been favorable the last couple of years. Maybe with the oil prices crashing, it'll go down even more. So we'll see.
Thanks.
Ben?
I guess I'd start with, when we talk about level of service, in my mind, there's a difference between a certain level of, I guess, call it acceptability, and then level of service. And so we need to get to a level of acceptability that can promote, safety. I mean, it's safety as much as anything, because leaves clogging drains, backing up on roads is a safety issue. trees coming down is a safety issue. And particularly with the town growing and moving into some areas that you were talking about where there weren't houses before and there weren't people living, I've seen in the development behind my house some of these 80, 100-foot pine trees coming down around new houses that nobody was ever in danger of these monster trees before, and now they are, coming across roadways and power lines. So to me, this discussion at some level is more about getting to a level of this acceptability of safety. Even more so than saying, well, what's the level of service that people expect? I think in town people would expect to not get hit by falling trees, not have trees continuously coming down on the roads and whatnot. So I mean, I'm fully in support of this, but I think it's a little more dire than just, hey, the people want something nicer than what we have. I don't think what we have is really acceptable currently, and so we need more folks to help out there. And one other question that I had, how much of the wear and tear on the roads and the drainage and whatnot do you think is from plowing and going outside to different contractors, kind of getting a, not to put a negative spin on it, but kind of a hodgepodge of different people with different levels of equipment? I mean, we've seen, I know on High Street, North Street, you see people going out with backhoes, with plows attached to them, and you can hear them coming down and hear them hitting curbs, hitting drains. How much does that, in your mind, impact the repair work you got to do?
The actual plowing operation in itself doesn't really do much harm to the roadway.
Yeah.
What does harm to the roadway, and not necessarily the roadway, but the structures in the roadway, is the road salt. The cast iron structures, salt and metallic objects that aren't rinsed don't mix. So what happens is a lot of those sunken catch basins that you'll see is because the ring that supports it has decayed and broken off. As far as harming the actual road surface, I really don't think that's an issue. With the chip seal, that may not be the case. That may be doing some harm because it's removing, if the stone hasn't had a chance to wear in, it's going to be plowed off.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why I'm not a huge fan of, not a huge fan, I just hate chip seal.
Yeah.
How do you really feel?
I'll tell you.
I'm not going to argue with you there. And then my last comment, Jim, would be specifically about some of the more skilled work that folks are doing. You talked about trees and how you're moving people around. It's nice to have somebody that can do multiple jobs, who can move around and do things. But there are items like the trees specifically, and you alluded to it a bit, where saying, hey, we need folks that really know what they're doing, that are properly trained, properly certified, and doing it every day. It's not like they're raking leaves one day, and then it's like, hey, remember you're going to be in the bucket truck, remember how trained you were on that, and how to be safe, or even how to be a spotter for the guy who's doing it. So for those reasons, I think I would definitely be supportive of some of these measures.
Thanks, Ben. Nancy?
I like the use of a co-op student for engineering. I think that's like a nice creative kind of something in between and would be great. And then as far as staffing, I mean, we need it. It's, I think they're doing a great job for what they have. They do. But we are putting more fields on, and just the numbers show it. We've gone backwards.
Thanks. Dave?
You mentioned the 30% MWRA assessment. What is that? Explain that to me.
The number?
Oh,
The MWRA assessment? That's an annual assessment that the town of Walpole pays to the Mass Water Resource Authority for the right to discharge sewer.
It's like the MBTA.
But we're billing for that.
Correct.
Okay. So you just think that the number is
That number for fiscal year -- I believe, is $4.2 million, somewhere thereabouts.
But that's reimbursed through
Rates.
Rates. Okay. My other question is about the use of town employees for the tree removal. Is there? Are you planning on using them for removal of any size tree, of any trees, or what?
There are certain trees that are beyond the capabilities of the equipment that we have. Those would be a tree that would require a crane.
Okay.
We do not have a crane. We have an aerial bucket truck. They can They can take down quite a few trees with that, but anything that's large and requires a crane would have to go to our contractor.
And so is the bucket also, so would you say, how much of the work would be trimming versus removal, or do we not know yet?
I would say probably 80% trimming.
And one of the things, I agree, I'm glad that the gentleman you mentioned is doing an assessment. One of the things that I found, especially walking door to door and even on Common Street, there are trees actually in the right-of-way that you have to go into the street to get around. And those ought to be looked at as being removed, especially on the main roads. I certainly think that that's an important thing. And I also think as part of that assessment is to look at other obstructions of right-of-way that maybe they're just a 1-inch tree right now. Let's take it down now while we can, or remove the brush, because like there's one across the street from me that it's okay on my street, it's not so bad, but it's definitely within the sidewalk right away, and it's a very large tree. So especially on some of these main roads, on the routes where the children are walking, we ought to be making these assessments. And frankly, there are fences in town rights of way that ought to be looked at to see, as part of a pedestrian safety, and maybe we can look for a grant for this, just make our sidewalks clear and safe. There's many places, in addition to trees, that, there's too big of a slope, or there's just not any place to walk. So
We are doing a sidewalk assessment. As you may recall, last town meeting, we got $100,000 for sidewalk repairs. As part of that repair process, we'll do an assessment, and I'm sure if any tree is causing a problem, Justin will deal with it.
all right, so that's about it for now. Thank you. Nice report. I didn't get to read it all, but I will.
We don't need the IT guy.
Hey, I do want to pick up on a couple of things that you've said in here that I think are pretty interesting and certainly should be followed up. So on page 15, you talk about to properly assess the needs of each department, the desired level of service that the stakeholders wish for the department to provide has to be determined. In the long term, this level can only be established by gathering input and comment from the stakeholders, and you refer to the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on how to go about that? Because I think it's a fair point, and one that's worthy of follow-up. Any thoughts on how to do it?
Probably through a public forum through this board. Mm-hmm. I think would be the best way to do it.
Okay. If you could put some thought into that and think about, okay, if we created a public forum, what are the things that we would be wanting to ask that public forum for input on, so that we could have some structure to the discussion and draw out the things that you're looking to focus on, so that we can gauge that. I think it'll be really valuable, and it would help us to be able to then set priorities and so forth. And you're absolutely right, we need to do that. The other thing that you said that was interesting was, in many cases, the action of hiring additional personnel is often thought of as the most appropriate way to fix, quote unquote, an operational shortcoming, when in actuality the same could be accomplished in other ways, such as cross-training and redeployment of staff as needed. And you mentioned cross-training earlier in your comments. Mm-hmm. I think that's also something that would be interesting to follow up on, is where are the opportunities for us to do that? And can we increase the capacity of the group by doing that? So maybe you could give that some thought and come back to us on that as well. I'd love to hear more about that. And then you make the ultimate point, say, by incorporating this and supplementing the staff levels over the next few years, Walpole's Public Works Department will, in my opinion, operate in a more efficient manner, and. I think that's the punchline, is that you could be more efficient, you could get more done. We've got more roads, we've got more fields, we've got more this, we've got big trees, we've got all kinds of things. You're not able to actually utilize all the equipment that you've got. And so understanding the stakeholder needs and how that translates then into this efficiency play, I think would be really interesting, Rick. So I like the things that you said on page 15. The last thing I'd comment on is one on page 16, which you also touched on in your comments, which is if you look at building maintenance and you've got 12 people called out in 2020 for union building maintenance, and you said 4 are custodians and 4 are schools, dedicated to the schools, so 8 out of 12. I think it would be interesting, as you point out here, you say the town may want to revisit and review the connection of the building maintenance and school departments to determine how it relates to a public works function. I think that is also something that's worth pursuing, Rick. So those are 3 things that I'd like to see as follow-ups come out of this conversation, and I think it would certainly help me to get your views and input on that as we start to figure out how do we solve what is very clearly an issue. Okay? Final comment I would make, and this is to all of the department heads who presented here tonight. First of all, I thought this workshop was really helpful. Whether it was the fire or the police or DPW, I thought this was really helpful. I got a lot out of it. You brought a lot of information. It's well organized, and I really appreciate that. There's also been some very great presentations here tonight. Clearly all 3 of you have a firm grasp on what you do, what your department does, what your mission is, and you have a view to the future, which I think is important. So I just wanted to thank you for that and acknowledge and recognize that I think you did 3 nice presentations tonight, demonstrating a real command of the facts. So thank you.
And the chief does have a call fire department.
You look at him.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'd like to go back now to the Summer Street 40B comments question. Again, we deferred this earlier, wanting to have the full board here to offer comments. As I said earlier and would reiterate now, the things that, when I read this, the things that sort of jumped at me a little bit were, I know we put a lot of energy into that letter that we sent to the state. We pulled everyone together. We had a laundry list of things that we felt were important in our feedback on the overall application to the state. Not all those things probably need to be in here or are necessary to be given to the ZBA, but I thought it would be interesting to say there was 100% of all of those things. How many of those things actually made their way in here, and have we got it all covered for at least those things that really need to be in front of the ZBA comment-wise? And then the second piece is the whole overall discussion on that South Walpole Common and the Rotary area. And are there opportunities for us to improve the road design and layout as we think about those units coming on board? One of my big concerns here is you got that driveway, you've got the railroad crossing with the gates, the 22 trains per day going back and forth. It's going to become a huge bottleneck. We call out the safety issue very well in here, but I don't know that we're calling out that bottleneck the way we should. And I'm wondering if there are opportunities to take a look at the way things are designed in that whole traffic system, if you will, and should we be looking to the ZBA to help think some of that through, following the results of traffic studies and so forth. So those are my thoughts going in. Obviously, I'd love other people to jump in as well. So, any other thoughts?
Yeah, my big issue down there is the whole, mainly for kids, the sidewalk, that rotary triangle, whatever we want to call that. How are kids really going to get to and from Boyden and in and out of the neighborhood? And we know a lot of them are going to ride bikes, and some will be walkers and runners, and just anything we can do to clean that up. And I know that right up the street from here, with the woodworker site, Pennington Crossing, I think it's called now, they're going to do some traffic work on 3 of the intersections and sort of bring them up to grade over time. So if we could do the same thing in that general area, I think that would help a lot, and help, follow up with what you said, help with the safety aspect as well.
Yeah. Ben?
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember as well, or to consistently bring up the basis for those requests, which is the increase in traffic, which is driven by the density of the development. So that we know from the original reports that were made that the density there is something like 300% more dense than the typical neighborhood, or that neighborhood in the surrounding area. That's driving the traffic increase, and the numbers from the applicant's own reports say that there's going to be an increase of 20% or more cars on Summer Street and coming across that intersection. So, the numbers and the traffic studies that have already been done do support a very serious consideration of the traffic triangle, traffic circle area, as well as the sidewalks and the access points there. And not even then getting to the public safety reasons for or concerns around that single access point. We mentioned that in our letter. We mentioned it previously. I know it was brought up at the last ZBA meeting, and it's something that we need to continue, challenging them to meet as, that's our expectation.
Thanks, Ben. Nancy?
Yes, also the sidewalk or lack of sidewalk on the other side of the development, which heads further up Summer Street. That roadway there has always been kind of difficult for kids, and it's all still within a close distance. And adding that traffic on the road, doesn't help it.
Right.
There needs to be access for pedestrians and things like that. I mean, we did also do the streetscape thing. Like, I'm wondering if we should be mentioning that because, how long ago did we do that? Like,
The complete streets?
yeah.
We make reference to it in one of the last paragraphs.
Right, but how,
It was within the last year.
yeah. And, their plan doesn't really address how they can help that in the rest of the town and how they can help that on the other side. Because I know that we are all talking about, which is very important, the train and safety right there and then safety to Boyden, but the, Eldor Drive and everybody on that side of it is still, not going to be able to get around. I like that we're definitely talking about what it looks like and from the street view, because I think that's very important. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that they could be doing.
David?
So, admittedly, the whole South Walpole calming traffic area is already problematic. But I think the added traffic that they are going to, this new development is going to create, especially during those early morning hours when the kids are making their way back and forth to school, and in the afternoon when traffic generally builds up. Makes it certainly makes it important that they help us deal with those pedestrian safety issues that are exacerbated by the increased traffic. So I think looking to them to redesign or help to assist us in looking at some solutions for that area are directly related to the increased traffic. And so not only does the increased traffic create a problem in itself of the increase in traffic, but it also creates more challenges as it relates to pedestrians. So I think certainly if we were to frame it in that way, that, and it's not uncommon, it's not unheard of for them to be assisting us with things off-site, and I think this is certainly, that area is directly going to be impacted in a not insignificant way by the increased traffic that they're going to create.
Thank you. Did you
I
get those?
took some notes from everyone, and the comment I also added in there was during the police chief's comments regarding the pedestrian, the crosswalk people, crossing guard. Thank you, Dave. And so what I could do is make some changes, add that in there, and send it off to the board and see if everyone's in agreement with that, and tweak it. And Jim, then you can sign it.
That'd be great. Yeah.
One other thing, from the beginning, where it's an at-grade crossing.
Yeah.
I know, nobody cared before except for us, but to sink that crossing would eliminate a lot of traffic backup. If it had been done from the beginning. You put it below grade, then you don't have the gates, you don't have anything. You put it under the road. And I know it's an expensive option, but it, from the beginning, would have been the best one.
A nit, but because this is a formal document going to the zoning board, could you use James instead of Jim?
Sure.
For me on both the front page and on the signatory line?
No problem.
Excellent, thank you. So I think where we landed was you'll take the input that we just gave it, give us another view back on the thing. What I just ask is everybody just give it a quick read, make sure that we captured everything, and then assuming that everybody's good with it, then they'll sign it and send it along. Okay? Good. Yeah.
One other thing I would add is that the next meeting of the ZBA is April 15th, and at that meeting, they're going to be talking about traffic, and I believe the traffic peer review is going to be complete by that meeting. So all of this that we're
That's
talking
why I
about.
want to get this in now. Yeah,
Right,
so-
right. It's going to be the point of the April 15th ZBA discussion.
And if you're okay, the chief just reached out and just mentioned something about a traffic engineer study would be used and possibly consider reducing the speed on Washington Street to 35. That about right, chief?
Yes, the traffic studies that were done for like Washington Street were done back in the 70s, late 70s probably. And I think at that time, South Walpole was probably a little much less populated and busy as it is now. So I think what we should do is extend their traffic study to include that part of Washington Street going up as far as south, so that they can reduce that speed limit from 40 to 35. We get a lot of complaints about that stretch because with that 85 percentile speed, if it's 40, they're doing 50, 52, and that's too fast for that area. So I think we should push them on that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chief.
So if the board's okay with that, I'll incorporate that. Yeah.
Thanks. And could I just ask for a motion to authorize me to sign following the incorporation of the comments and the review by the board?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500. Jim, do you have any updates that
I
you
do.
want to give? Okay.
And I'm glad
Yeah.
these people have hung around, because I'd like them to weigh in.
Okay.
My update this week is on one item, and one item alone, the coronavirus. I kind of want to lay out for the board, this is not on the agenda, but I think it's appropriate given the governor's conference this afternoon. As you may be aware that he declared a state of an emergency this afternoon. School officials, board of health officials, we all got together in my office, watched the whole news conference. It was good to have everyone in the same room. As of late this afternoon after the conference, we received 7 people have been tested in Walpole. 5 have come back as not having it. The other 2 we're still waiting on. We've gone forward with creating a website for residents to get information relating to the coronavirus. We've also gone forward with developing 2 memos today, one for immediate release to all residents, which is attached there. The second one is gone out to all of our employees through the department heads, just to kind of outline where we're at, what's the plan right now, what you should be mindful of. Both letters or memos are really similar. It was actually, I got a tweet this afternoon around 7 o'clock that the Mass Municipal Association actually got a hold of the one that we sent out to all of our residents and has used it as an example that other cities and towns should use throughout the state. So that's nice. I appreciate that. So we posted that on there. We've created a website that on the front page, we actually took down our energy aggregation, substituted that for coronavirus information. Residents can just go, right now there's only 3 documents on there. The update from the school superintendent about a week ago, the update from Melissa, and then this joint release from Melissa and I. That's there. I'm sure more information will go on there as it becomes available. Plan going forward for town officials is to have a weekly standing meeting on Thursdays, probably around 11 o'clock, to go over anything that's come up. As you all know, this is a fluid situation. It's changing day to day, so it will continue to change day to day. My plan is to work with the IT, the fire department, DPW, Board of Health to ensure that we have continuations of operations plan in place. If things get worse and if we have to close facilities for an extended amount of time. things I'm working on now that these memos are completed is working on identifying key personnel who may need a laptop to work from home and may not have a laptop. Right now, I found out the fire chief doesn't have a laptop. A couple of other people, Mike, myself, and Patrick are working on a list. We're going to finalize that list tomorrow as to who needs what, like payroll. I want to make sure that those people can log into our system, do it remotely. The permitting software for the building commissioner's office, I'm not that worried about, but I want to make sure everything's up and running. They all have tablets down there, so they can continue to go out and keep the building permits going and everything. Munis, I want to make sure, I know Jody has remote access, and I think Marilyn does too, but I want to make sure Lisa, the assistant treasurer tax collector, also has access. So these are all things I'm going through. And then I want to work with the police and fire departments and Rick to identify some key personnel as far as police, fire, water techs, some of the dispatchers too, how we're going to handle things. These are all things that I've just sat here thinking of, is it a matter of potentially splitting up shifts, limiting shifts to a minimum manning, closing town offices to the public, moving a small handful of personnel to a certain building. These are all ideas kicking around and nothing's been finalized, but just want to let the board know it's fresh on my mind. The St. Patrick's Day breakfast over at the senior center was canceled this afternoon. The police chief the police and fire chief were comfortable with that. Kerry was more than comfortable with it. She thought it was a good idea. The cleaning of the buildings. Don Anderson came in this week and did a great job of working with his staff to ensure that this place was completely clean, disinfected on Saturday. We did the same thing at the senior center on Sunday. He had 3 people in at the senior center for about 6 hours doing the same thing over there. We talked a little bit. The senior center is only about 13,000 square feet. This afternoon, after the press conference, we talked about the high school, which is 100,000 plus square feet. And at 3 personnel, 6 hours, you can do the math, it gets kind of challenging for them with their custodians. So what we talked about was having some building maintenance personnel, and if necessary, getting the DPW in, whoever we can get, and I haven't had a chance to go over this with Rick, in there to wipe the building down if necessary, if there's an outbreak or something that needs to be contained right away. My attitude on this one is I'll figure it out as far as payment. I joked with Bridget, I said it's going to be on your bill, but you're going to hit me up for it anyways. Right now, our snow and ice budget is about 400 or so thousand, so that's an added bonus that we may have to dip into come town meeting. But it's just going to be a juggling of money by the time we get there. I just want to make sure everybody's safe. Melissa, she's only been the Board of Health Director for about 6 months. Rika, our Deputy Director, she's only been here a couple of months. And Trish, our Board of Health Nurse, has been in the position about 6 months too. They've all really stepped up to the plate, stayed on top of things. When we had an issue over the weekend that was a little bit of a scare, I had an answer within a half hour from the Department of Public Health, and that was on a Sunday. So they're stepping up to the plate, so much so I mentioned that the clerk in the Board of Health was retired. I was going to hold the position open. I've decided just to go forward and fill it. No sense leaving it open when they need staff down there to deal with everything. So I think that's about it for now. I'll continue to keep the board updated, the public updated. I reached out to our departments and a few people on Facebook, asked them to post the memo to the residents out online. I believe it's already out there, so it's being shared with multiple people to get the word out that we're staying on top of it. So, did I miss anything, everyone? No. So, any questions, any ideas, comments?
Yeah, I think you've done a good job of laying this out. We should all be constantly thinking about it, and as you point out, it's a fluid situation. But it's nice to see that you and the department heads are on top of this, that you've got processes in place, that you're thinking about contingency situations. And, it's one of those things we're just going to have to do what we have to do. Safety's got to come first, and to your point, we'll figure out how to, pay for these cleansings if we have to.
David?
I didn't even think of some of the things I appreciate the fact that you're thinking about these issues, especially town employees who might get ill or just being careful, not wanting to come in. I think that's a good idea. But one of the concerns is certainly people gathering has been an issue, and people are canceling events. At what point do we look at the senior center and say we have to cut back access to that? That maybe people, especially since the elderly are more susceptible to more crises in this illness than young people or people of good health. And, you know, the proximity, you know, these events are very popular, and there's a lot of people that are using the center. I think we certainly got to be keeping an eye out for what Mass Public Health says about, you know, when we ought to be saying, limiting those events, or testing people at the door, you know, checking their temperature at the door, or just telling people, or at least telling them that if you have any kind of runny nose or anything, you shouldn't be here. And then in moving our staff to looking out for those people that are normally there, but now we have to go find them and check in on them or whatever. That's certainly a big concern. I know Rhode Island Hospital, you can't go visit the hospital now. There's a lot of things happening that is, a change in protocols is because of the concern about especially elders getting sick. So I think we have to, that may be one of the first things that we have, drastic moves we have to make, is that maybe the senior center's activities are limited.
Just touching on the senior center, and I should have included this. ESCO has reached out to Kerry and informed them they're in the process of developing a plan as far as if Norwood shuts down, are they going to they would shift regional operations to Walpole to distribute the meals and everything. So I'm going to use this term a lot. It's a fluid situation, but it's something that the decision may come up that we're going to close some town buildings, and I'll make sure to include the board in that decision, just as we talked about, touch base on Sunday with the scare we had there. So it could become a real situation.
Okay, any other comments?
I just say thanks for staying on top of it, all the department heads, and keeping track of it day to day. I think that's important, and you're obviously doing the job, so that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Jim?
No, that's
okay. So I think we're down through the agenda down to the executive session that we're going to go into to talk about the memorandum of agreement with the dispatchers. So I'm going to move us there. So pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, the purpose of the session will be to, 1, conduct strategy with respect to a memorandum of agreement with the dispatchers union, and 2, to conduct strategy with respect to police and AFSCME contracts from the town administrator, as a discussion in open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's positions. We will go into executive session. Our intent is to come back out of executive session and potentially take a vote on the dispatcher memorandum of agreement after the executive session. So, David?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jim, yes. Ben?
Yes.
Yes.
So we're now in executive session. We're back out of executive session and prepared to take a vote. So I'll entertain a motion on the dispatcher's memorandum of agreement.
I'll make a motion to ratify and sign the memorandum of agreement with the dispatchers.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 5-0-0. I believe that concludes our business for this evening.
Okay.
So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 5-0-0. Thank you. Patrick, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good night.